I grew up in the 90s, which is a very interesting time because the culture of Hong Kong is starting to export, like in the form of film, for example. Like a lot of movie stars starting to work in Hollywood and a lot of composer as well, writing for film. So my generation is kind of more interested in cultivating ourselves, going to a lot of Hong Kong Arts Festival, going to opera, going to orchestral performances, and even jazz clubs to expose ourselves to a lot of this cultural stuff.
We love the San Gabriel Valley. There are some amazing people and businesses here, and we think they deserve the spotlight. Welcome to the SGV Master Key Podcast. We'll have on the people that make the SGV great. We'll find out what makes them tick, their ups and downs, their history, and we're going to have fun doing it. This is the SGV Master Key Podcast. And now your hosts, Scott Warmoth and Russell Mano.
All right, SGVers, welcome back to another episode of the SGV Master Key Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy learning about the people here in the San Gabriel Valley, this is a show for you. We document and share the stories of the people of the San Gabriel Valley. So if you're a returning listener, thanks for tuning in. We hope to bring you another interesting guest today from right here in the San Gabriel Valley. And this would be week 3, but this is episode 3 that you're hearing my voice only, or seeing me rather than our co-host Scott, who is still ill. So we wish him a quick recovery and a return to the show. So now you get to hear Tori's voice again for the show. But, I always wish that I could play a musical instrument. Being around your family is so much fun because they're always playing musical instruments, like your mom, Johnny. Mm-hmm. Who else plays an instrument?
I know how to play the piano, and then Priscilla and Ben also learned. But yeah, Johnny and Mom are definitely the more enthusiastic ones for the piano.
It seems like you guys have not a traditional way of learning, though, right? Like, is it more free? Like you're free to discover on your own how to play?
Yeah, we did. Mom did hire a piano teacher for us when we were younger, and then she moved out. So then it was kind of just up to us whether we wanted to continue to do the piano or not.
And do you play today?
Sometimes. I know how to read the sheet music, and so then if I want to play, then I can pull one out and do that. But yeah, Johnny is the one who likes to play a lot.
Oh, you know how to read sheet music?
Yeah.
Okay. That's always intimidating for me. But I see people enjoy playing an instrument later on in life, just for the joy of it. And I really wish that I could have that. Perhaps I didn't have the right motivation growing up, but I really see and treasure and admire people that can play anything, whether it's the drums or keep a beat or piano or guitar. I guess I'll still probably pursue playing guitar, probably. I hope so. I don't know. But anyway, there are a lot of amazing music talents here in the San Gabriel Valley. There are amazing teachers and there are amazing studios. And one of the ways that you can find out about the San Gabriel Valley is through San Gabriel Valley Now, your source for city news, announcements, events, special savings, and everything SGV. Check them out on Instagram, sgv.now, and read their SGV Now magazine on their website, sgvnow.com. Well, that little intro into music is going to bring us to today's guest. He is a composer and a pianist. His name is Alan Chan. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Russell.
Yeah, and you were a referral from Paul Kuo, is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so he was also a guest on this show, and he owns an academy. I forget what kind. It's
it's a pop rock academy.
Pop rock, that's right. Yeah. And you are a composer.
Yeah.
And so for those who don't know what that is, can you share with us what that is?
Essentially, a composer is you write the music. You can say songwriter. It's kind of similar.
Oh, okay.
Of course, songwriter, they write songs. I write songs, but also write symphonies and big band charts, chamber music. And I'm writing an opera too. So just basically the person who creates the music.
Wow, that's fascinating. Wow.
Thank you.
And how long have you been doing this?
Since I was in high school. I grew up in Hong Kong, and I came to the country 1997. Around that time, I was 18 at that time, And already when I start learning the piano, I was just piggyback on what you said earlier about learning an instrument. It was very spontaneous. So I was 6 years old, and my mom stopped by. Myself and my mom passed by a music store, and she just casually asked me, "Would you like to learn the piano?" I say, "Yes, sure." And that's how I started. They didn't really force me or do anything. Basically, we just like spontaneously respond, and kind of I start learning the piano, and I got really interested about the notes on paper.
Oh, really?
And that's why when I start realizing my interest in actually writing music, and I slowly just kind of start copying, whatever I see in the piano book, and I try to make something up, and I don't know what those notes are originally. And then slowly I start, channeling, making melodies and listening to other composers' works, symphonies and so forth, and it just keeps growing.
Wow, that's fascinating. So were you playing around with this, creating at a very young age?
Yeah, and that's another thing which is played by ear. We usually say play by ear. You listen to a song and then you kind of wanted to replicate that on the piano. I already started doing that in high school. It was just pop songs. Actually, I had one classmate older than I, a couple of years older than I. He was just improvising on the piano. I found it fascinating. He doesn't have any music in front of him. And then he played all these different pop songs, and I start copying what he's doing. And then I start listening to all kinds of music. So I was used to be the, karaoke, right? So I used to be the karaoke for my classmates. They would want to sing this song, and I would do the accompaniment for them. And or they would just be like, want me to DJ. I don't know what the equivalence of DJ, but basically they want to hear a song and they ask me to play. And if I know the song, I would play, And so that's kind of how, like, play by ear, combining with the idea of wanting to create music. And that's kind of how I started as a composer.
And were you doing that in Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I want to come back. I'm interested in your journey of to become a composer. This show is called the SGV Master Key Podcast, and so what is your connection to the SGV? When did you arrive here, specifically in the San Gabriel Valley?
That was 2004. And I went to, I was attending USC as a doctoral student. And so that's how I start, meeting a lot of friends and in San Gabriel Valley. First, I was in East Pasadena.
Okay.
And then I moved all over the place. I was in Hollywood a little bit. I was in, even on the West Side.
Wow, okay.
For a few years. But then I was on a journey for about 5 years or so that I was kind of a nomad. I was traveling between here and Brooklyn, New York, and I was attending a big band. It's called Professional Training Program for Big Band Composers. This is jazz big band. So jazz big band, if you think about like Frank Sinatra or Duke Ellington, that kind of like 17-piece jazz big band.
17-piece. So that means that's a lot of instruments. Wow.
Yeah. I call it jazz orchestra because I like the 17-piece with saxophones, trumpets, trombone, and rhythm section, but I can do a lot more than a typical swing feel kind of music. I kind of want to use it as a tool to express myself in many different ways. And that has always been a little thing inside of me, although I attended USC to study classical composition. So that just kind of put aside for a very long time. And then I graduated and I got into this particular workshop in New York. So I started attending and writing my big band music. So that's how I started writing jazz.
And then how did you finally end up in the San Gabriel Valley?
It was, I moved back 2014 kind of permanently. And then I'm now teaching in a community college. So that's kind of how I kind of settled down and start doing actually a number of gigs here in San Gabriel Valley. I'm actually going to be playing at the Huntington as well this coming fall at the Autumn Moon celebration.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
When you say playing, does that mean that your big band orchestra is going to be there, or you yourself are playing something?
Actually, it's going to be my small band. So 17-piece band, of course, I do this a concert couple of times a year. But for this particular event, it's going to be my small band, which is about 4 people, a jazz quartet. So I'll be on the keyboard, and then I will be with rhythm section as well as saxophone together.
Oh. I heard you say express yourself through, so when you are creating music or composing, you feel yourself is being expressed as the band is playing their instrument?
Good question. I always, because I have training as a pianist, but also when I was in Hong Kong, I also studied percussion and French horn. So I have a little bit of an idea of how to play some instruments. Even with wind instruments, I actually had a flute before, and also a little violin at home. So the physicality of how to, because when we write for another person or write for the orchestra, it's not possible for us to learn every single instrument in the orchestra. But we should know generally what those instruments can do and cannot do, and what is the best way for them, like what is their strength. Like a French horn, this particular range is really, really cool, when it's being played. If you may hear it in Star Wars and all these different soundtracks, or violin. You can do tremolos, you can do a lot of different techniques, only exclusively for violin. So this is something kind of we learn as a composer in colleges all the way to grad school, and try to write as idiomatic as possible.
Wow. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated with people who know at a very early age what they want to do and they pursue it. And, that seems so easy, but did you know that your path was going to be in music, from a very young age?
I think it's interesting because, I'm from Hong Kong. It's a financial hub of the world, and it's very rich. It's a very rich place. And a lot of times, you're expected to be successful in terms of making a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Or nobody would think you should be, you imagine yourself being an artist. But I think I grew up in the 90s, which is a very interesting time. Because the culture of Hong Kong is starting to export, like in the form of film, for example, like a lot of movie stars starting to work in Hollywood, and a lot of composer as well, writing for film. So there's my generation is kind of more interested in cultivating ourselves, going to a lot of Hong Kong Arts Festival, going to opera, going to orchestral performances, and even jazz clubs to expose ourselves to a lot of this cultural stuff. And I kind of like the idea of, just be able to write music, be able to tell stories, essentially, of many walks of life, and using music as a way to do that.
You must have had really supportive parents.
Yeah, my parents are very cool. They are still in Hong Kong, by the way. They are very, that definitely they were very supportive. But I think that their way of doing it is by just not saying so much. They just kind of let me do whatever I want to do, and kind of when I said, well, I need some help on this, then they would jump in and support. So that's really cool of them. I kind of just initiate all these things on my own, going to undergrad at University of Miami, and then I was in Kansas City for my master's before moving to San Gabriel Valley. So it's just they have always been very supportive on this journey.
Yeah, that's in contrast to what I know of a lot of Asian parents. When their kids are pursuing something that they may not agree with, it's different to be silent. And most of the time, I would hear them coming against it. Saying you should do something more sensible, or something I think that is better for you.
Right.
So wow, that's awesome.
And I think one indicator is just the result. Like I'm producing results, and of course, besides awards and all that stuff, because I've competed and have winning awards through my music, and that gives them more confidence on me. I guess that's kind of, as time goes, they would observe what I did, and they kind of approve what I did.
Wow. And when did that start to happen? Like after high school, during high school, that they started to see, not just through the awards, that you were passionate about it, or that there was a future here for you? When did that start to show?
It's one thing interesting about Hong Kong is there's just not a lot of support in terms of education for composers. Like if you are a pianist or you are a violin player, you can attend the junior program at the Academy of Performing Arts, and you can win awards and can go out and do different things. But for composition is a very different discipline. It's more like artistic creation, right? So it's an artist. So there are no teachers that taught me composition. I couldn't ask for, I had a private teacher who were a lecturer at the academy. So I took lessons with him occasionally, but mainly I just self-taught how to write. But really, once I arrived in the United States, I really get a chance to meet with very good musicians and have formal training in composition, learning theories and things like that to help me to express more professionally, let's say, or more idiomatic in my writing.
One of the advices that I wish I heard growing up that I hear now is to spend time in the field that you want to pursue, like actually being there, seeing what it actually is like. Did you get that opportunity? Did you care about that? Or were you like, I just want to create music and compose and I'm going to pursue it no matter what? And did it end up being what you thought it was going to be?
It's very interesting because I was I came here as an international student. So there is a little bit different than domestic student because there's a lot of restrictions of what I can do in terms of like having job opportunities. I noticed a lot of musicians, they're already working. When they attend grad school, they're already working.
What does that mean? Like they're doing gigs?
They're doing gigs. They're teaching. They are working at church. Church is actually a big, important sector that, because they're always church musicians. And of course, I mentioned about teaching and other gigs and so forth. So that I didn't even think of those opportunities until I get to LA. When I start meeting with a lot of people who are already in the studio, they're already recording, they're already union members, by the way, and they start, going to recording sessions. And I start attending some of these recording sessions, including one episode of The Simpsons, how they actually record. They basically book a studio for 3 hours, and they record all the songs. What is interesting is sometimes some of these songs were rock bands, some of these were orchestra, some of these are choir. So they would just set up the studio in many different ways, a couple of ways, and they can move from one area to another. They record the whole episodes in 2.5 hours.
Wait, so I thought the Simpsons songs were always just the same. Like they would just, reuse the same songs.
No, and that is so amazing. They have the budget and the resources to actually make fresh music every episode. And that's what I just blew my mind. Of course, some of the songs we already know, like pop songs, but they re-recorded them with live musicians.
Wow.
So seeing that, I was just like, wow, this is really cool and so versatile, the musicians here in LA. And that's, for a composer, is like amazing because I can, test a lot of materials. I can always write new music and they can play it, they can even perform it with just one rehearsal. And so it's quite nice to be in LA and in San Gabriel Valley for this.
Wow. So you went to school to learn more about theory and composition, and let's say you've graduated now, you have this degree. How do you turn that into a living and a lifestyle?
Now, I told you that I got my doctorate degree in classical composition, and I graduated in year 2008. We kind of remember what 2008 was.
Sure.
Now the career path usually for graduates, especially for doctoral students, is going to teach in colleges.
Oh, okay.
There were literally no jobs, zero. And so, but interestingly enough, I got an opportunity to attend a conference. I started writing big band charts thanks to a professor, Shelly Berg. Now he is a dean of School of Music at the Frost School of Music in Miami, University of Miami. And he encouraged me. He was a professor at USC at that time. He encouraged me to, hey, why don't you just start writing big band stuff? Because I had training at University of Miami many years ago. I took jazz arranging, nothing to do with my classical training. I just for fun, I took it for 1 year and I really liked it. I didn't think that it would be what I'm going to do, writing jazz, maybe classical more likely. So I kind of just follow my classical path in my education. And it was really since I start writing big band music about 2006, 2007 that I start to change like my style and my way of approaching music. And then I start writing all these big band charts and I start sending them out to competitions and conferences. I got into this conference in South Florida. It was Chuck Owen, who is really a prominent composer of big band genre, invited me to attend to. Their band is going to perform my music. One piece that I wrote. The piece is called A Shrimp Tale, and it's about. I wrote it here in LA, but I was nostalgic about Miami. I just really like that salsa and stuff. So it's a little bit of a salsa tune, but my music is always a little bit more symphonic. It goes through a couple of stages, that kind of thing. But then this piece got performed. And I met composer Jim McNeely there, and he is the director of the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop. And he said, well, why don't you apply, come to New York and work with the reading band, and, we will workshop your music and get some feedbacks and stuff like that. And that's kind of how I started my journey writing for big band and for jazz.
I'm so intrigued in what it takes to write music where so many different musical pieces are coming in. Where do you start? Did you have the idea of what you want it to sound like, feel like how do you start that process?
Usually it's kind of random. Sometimes it's I have some musical ideas in my head and I want to write. Sometimes it's...
When you say write, what does that mean?
Write is actually literally you take a piece of paper and start jotting down some ideas. Musical ideas. Often they are as easy as a melody. You just da 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 mi fa sol mi do re mi do, and then you write it down. Sometimes I have other ideas like texture. I have a string texture that I want to write. So if you think about paintings, you have many different expressionism, you have impressionism and all these different styles, right? So sometimes it's more graphic, like more image oriented. Sometimes it's, I want to write a song dedicated to my grandmother, for example. Then I would go from that direction. So it comes from many, many directions. Eventually, it would be a piece with a number of measures and a double bar line, indicated that's the end of the piece. And so that's always the case. But the starting point is kind of just very obscure, a little bit more mysterious. I don't know where it's going to go. And then I start working on the materials and I start developing passages. And then things just start kind of grow organically. And I just tie, connect the dots, so to speak.
So it's not a linear process. Like you start from the first note and then you go all the way to the end. You're seeing these different pieces, melodies and textures, and then you're bringing it together.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing about jazz, it's what I learned from jazz also, because if you listen to jazz, somebody's soloing. It doesn't have to be jazz, it could be rock. Sometimes you hear somebody soloing on the instrument. And then that person will bring in all these quotes from another tune, maybe a tune from Freddie Mercury or from David Bowie or somebody else, or even John Coltrane or Wayne Shorter, And so I like to quote stuff also. Just sometimes I throw in just this teeny little bit of, James Bond theme, and kind of spice up things a little bit, or kind of signify something bombastic or something really heroic happening. And then I have original ideas as well. Sometimes the whole song is its original idea, but sometimes I could bring in some kind of ideas from other tunes or culture as well.
And when you finish a piece that you've written, what does that feel like? And is there an anticipation to hear it being performed?
Very much. Very, very much. We usually nowadays, because it's just time, we're all very busy. So I usually, when there is a show, that's kind of my goal, to write something new. And so I get the chance to usually work with the band once before any performance. And so I would be very carefully checking everything, making sure there's no typos, and always very eager to hear what I think in my head, because it has to do with combining different instruments together. This is called orchestration. So is it effective? Is that the effect that I want? Am I using the right mute for the trumpet or trombone? Because if you use the wrong mute, it sounded different. Maybe that's not what I want. So there is still a little bit of a process of revision after the first read they made. We usually rehearse at the Union in the Berg. And then after that, it's like, wow, my God, I need to make changes. And then I'll bring the final version to the performance.
It's absolutely clear that you're very passionate about this. I can just hear it in your voice and see it on your face. But there must be something beyond when you create it. And is it hearing it? Is it seeing the musicians perform it? Is it seeing the reaction of the people enjoying it? What else do you get from this process?
Actually, all of it. I usually, because it's a lot of manpower. You bring 17 people together, and sometimes singers and soloists I would invite. And so I usually would hire some just to have it recorded, audio and video. So I have accumulated, I don't know how many hours of videos, and I actually didn't know what to do about them. But I usually use that to evaluate, if the piece is effective. And sometimes at the performance you may not pay attention to what the audience. Well, of course everybody claps after a tune, but then occasionally you realize, wow, they really enjoy the piece, or they feel very satisfied, and that's really a thrill to see that reaction.
Sure. Yeah.
To hear that reaction.
Yeah. Do you rewind and watch it over and over again, the reaction?
I'm not so self-indulged, but
oh, let me hear the applause again.
But I always think about, why are they excited about this, And so I think about, maybe a lot of my music is not, compared to pop music, usually 2 to 3 minutes long, and it has to be radio friendly because it's easier for them to program and so forth. There's a lot of commercial concerns. My music is more artistic concerns, like what am I expressing my ideas effectively? Is it communicating with the audience? So that's always what I'm trying to do, and make my next song better, and like that.
I see. We have to select music for our social media stuff, and when I was selecting it, I thought, okay, this beat goes with the tempo of the speech, and I noticed that Victoria was selecting music that resonated just way more. And I said, what are you doing? Why are you so good at selecting it? And then I learned about her that I said, she goes to feel with music. And then she said she's trying to amplify the feeling of the clip. And I thought, wow, okay, that's why I suck at it. And that's why she's so good at it.
That's cool.
But so she hears it in a very different way. But yeah, so are you trying to give the audience an emotion, a feeling through your music?
Definitely. And also something a little bit unexpected. And when you see a 17-piece big band, there is a cultural connotation, because, swing music used to be the popular music of this country. And it's kind of this really old style and so forth. I'm trying to bring it to a new territory, kind of a new regime of sound and creativity, because they can do a lot more than what they have been doing. They have been doing in a particular style, but I really feel like, well, I'm going to bring in, Chinese culture, Balinese culture, Spanish culture, just different classical music. Even, it's brass-oriented, trumpet, trombone, saxophone. I can kind of just pretend they are like strings sometimes, write it like strings, and see what it feels like. And so the audience, I'm trying to give audience kind of a new perspective of what this big band can do. Basically, it's like an orchestra, like a symphony orchestra, but only 17 people, which is a lot more economical than the 67-piece or 70-piece orchestra, symphony orchestra. But it can do a lot of things, and so I really am into experimenting and try to make it also fun to listen to as well.
Yeah, this type of music was the popular dance music of like the 20s, where adults would go out and they would dance, and they would expect to maybe even dance to a live band, I think, in the 20s.
Yep.
And I hear it, and it's so lively and rich, and to see where we've gone today, it's very different.
Yeah. Very different. I do have, I do quotes from time to time, because I want to make sure that people know that I'm actually writing for a big band. Yes, this is a big band, but my music is more for listening. It's really an enjoyment of listening, kind of along the lines of classical music. But from time to time, you can always, for example, I do lend some of my music for podcasts or shows if they found it useful. So I've done that before.
Really?
Even a snippet of it, One only thing is that because this is all live musicians, so I use some of the live recordings for that purpose.
We're in the process of redoing our intro, our transition, and outro. So we can talk after.
Sure.
Yeah. Alan, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them. What did you bring with you today?
Now, this is unmistakably a Chinese instrument.
Okay.
But let me read this company. Patrimonio Cultura de la Nación.
Okay, that doesn't sound Chinese.
So this is actually an instrument in Chinese called suana, or sham. If you know that there's a Western instrument, this is a double reed instrument, and it is imported through the Silk Road to China. I believe, maybe 600, 700 AD or CE. And it turns into a Chinese-style double reed horn.
Wait, so this is from 1,300 years ago?
This is not that
I mean, but
old.
this instrument has existed since then.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, okay.
And how now this is turning to Cuba. Why did I find this instrument in Cuba? Is they call this la corneta china. And I only know about this after I went to Cuba. The first time I've been to Cuba twice. 2017, I was in Havana, and I didn't anticipate anything. I was just I'm interested in Afro-Cuban music. And I like the rhythm and polyrhythm, and I want to learn more, and I want to travel to Cuba to kind of get a feel of it. Then the first day I arrived in Havana, I went to a bicycle tour, and we passed by the Christopher Columbus Cemetery. We're on the way to the cemetery, and then on the stop sign they said, "Well, look at this on the left. This is the Cementerio Chino, the Chinese cemetery." And I was like, "What?" A whole block, this entire block, very big. Not very big, but it's not as big as the main cemetery. But it was like, wow, there were Chinese people in Cuba, and they set roots there, So that kind of started my curiosity. I started doing some research, and then I found out about this La Corneta China. And actually, this instrument, it has been used in carnivals in Santiago de Cuba since 1915. So this is the melodic instrument that is used to play melodies, along with the Congo drums, as well as all the other percussion instruments they use. So for more than 100 years, and still today, Cubans learned this instrument. They make them in Cuba. And I found that just fascinating how, culture, can pass down to generations and many different shapes and forms. And it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, that is. Thank you for bringing that.
Yeah.
So I heard you play it before. Well, maybe playing it is generous, but making some sound with it earlier. And so is this not where you can actually play this instrument? Is it just more for decoration, or can you actually play this?
No, you can actually play it. It's just that it hasn't been played for a very long time. Now, one thing about this design is that I compare this because this was brought to Cuba probably, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, because the history of indentured labor in the 19th century, brought Chinese to the island of Cuba. And many of them, they stayed, they didn't go back to, and they brought all this culture to Cuba. And so the style, this is actually the older style of suana. And after 1949, China had made a lot of reforms on this instrument. And so there are new designs of the instrument as well. So I bought this in Cuba because I first learned to play this instrument in Cuba with a Cuban teacher. And so I purchased this from him. And I show it to my suana collaborator, Guo Yazhi. Guo Yazhi is now living in Boston as a master's on this instrument. And so we kind of compare a little bit about the modern suana and versus this a little bit of a older style. And also the reed they use, it's the leaf. It's more tropical plant. I'm not exactly sure what tropical plant they use, but it's not actual reed. It's actually leaf that they use.
I see.
So yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing it, and thank you for sharing that story with us.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, I'm interested in sharing or helping the listener understand your path, because there may be some people who are interested in composing music or just love music and don't know what path to pursue. So I'd like to get into that a little bit, but let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
At Wormouth Law, they believe that just because you speak a foreign language, come from a different culture, or simply don't know how to navigate the legal system, that should not prevent you from compensation from injury or receiving benefits. Their multicultural staff have been helping SGVers like you for over 38 years. Visit law888.com or call them at 626-784-7017 and tell them you heard about them on this podcast.
All right, we're back with Alan. Alan, before the break, you were sharing about this instrument, and I also wanted to go into sort of helping the listener in maybe, knowing how to navigate this world of music and composing as you have done it. But we used to do this segment after the break where we had a question asked from, it was called Like You cards. And we've sort of run out of those, but we have a new set now. And they shouldn't be very, very penetrating, but it's a way for us to get to know you and the listener to get to know you a little bit more. You can choose to answer it or not, so no pressure. But they're not very penetrating. They shouldn't be. So I'll let Victoria read it. Here we go.
Okay, so the question is, if you could have any celebrity be your best friend, who would you pick?
Oh, there are quite a few. I would love to. I like the wisdom of older people. And I would definitely be interested in meet Herbie Hancock, the jazz composer and pianist.
Oh.
He's actually the director of jazz at the Walt Disney Concert Hall, and he has been in the field for many, many years. He's the master, like he's the god of jazz right now.
That's so fascinating because I first heard him from my wife, like a few weeks ago. Oh. Yeah, she introduced me to him. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the interesting about Herbie Hancock is he's also interested not only in music, but he's interested in science too. He's very interested in. He talks about how he enjoy studying, being a math person, and he's very, of course, super smart but his musical expression and his composition is just really stunning. Yeah.
Wow. I don't really get starstruck with celebrity, and I guess celebrity can be, Hollywood, it can be music, it can be sport, and I'm not so much interested to see or meet either of those people. I'm really not. But at first when you said celebrity, my mind went to Keanu Reeves. When I like his I like his movies, yeah. But I also like when I watch him and he the way he's so down to earth and he's remained very humble. Sure. in the public eye. Like I'm amazed by that. You know, like he hasn't been changed by his popularity.
Yeah, I met some really very prominent musicians, and like Alex Acuna from the Weather Report. They were very famous in the 70s and 80s, and fusion jazz group, and he's all over the place getting lifetime achievement awards in music and so forth. But then when you meet him, he's just a cool guy.
Well, so Alan, back to you and your story. What advice would you have for the young person out there who really loves music as you did, who isn't so much thinking that they can become an artist themselves and play music, but wants to pursue something like you? What advice would you have to give them?
It is very interesting because we go through a path that is kind of designed already, like you go through the school system, you pursue your bachelor's degree and master's degree and doctoral degree and all that. Everything seems to be well thought through, and when you get this degree, you're going to achieve these, My experience is that no, not necessary. You kind of have to discover your interests. For example, jazz is something that is usually my afterthought. I don't think about. I listen to jazz all the time, by the way. That's kind of my first choice to listen to is jazz, rock, pop music, you name it, And but all of a sudden, that becomes, as I dig deeper and deeper, that becomes like really what I want to do, and looking for opportunity to achieve that. So I think the path is kind of you have to discover who you are. And that's going to take, of course, a lot of time and effort. But and then you start, connecting with people, especially in the music industry. Fortunately, because I attended USC, there were a lot of already, working musicians, and so I maintained those connections. And then I found out that someday they were very helpful because I was putting my first big band together, 2011, in LA. And I was, this really good friend really helped me, just call the musicians, and some of these musicians were working in Hollywood for many, many years. Wow. So I get to get some feedbacks, not only just from young players, but more mature players as well. And that becomes a very great opportunity. And I kind of just keep at it. I do usually about four concerts a year and various jazz clubs, including the Baked Potato and Vibrato Grill Jazz, and also in San Gabriel Valley as well. So it's really kind of a lifelong journey and persistence and believe in yourself. And of course, through this process, you just have to learn about who you are. And that's kind of an abstract thing, who I am and that kind of. But I think it's those qualities.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. One more question: if you could go back and do something or one thing differently about to change your path, what would that be?
Good question. I thought maybe I could spend a little bit more time in Hong Kong and to develop my music there more. Because I had several opportunities, but I kind of chose, the U.S. because I never really quite regretted because, LA is such a great place to, especially the diversity. So what is diversity? It's really about people from all different cultures, all walks of life come together and not accept but necessary, but, collaborating with each other and really have the risk-taking, the courage to take risks. But I also feel that I could bring some of these ideas to Hong Kong, for example, because it's also a very vibrant and a diverse place. But anyway, I'm here and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing here. And so,
Awesome. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
I guess one of the other takeaways is if you want to be successful, go to a school too, like USC. That's going to give you those connections right away. But no, I'm just joking. Well, Alan, we're going to move on to the final portion of the show where we get to learn a little bit more about you and what you like in the San Gabriel Valley.
Sure.
So, Alan, this is called the SGV3, and we'd like you to share with our listeners your 3 favorite or most memorable places or moments in the San Gabriel Valley. So,
Okay, so the first all have something to do with related to my music.
okay.
So the very first place is a place. It's actually a private home. I cannot tell you the address because it's a private home, but a friend of mine who has a company, Altadena Energy and Solar, and he started his business there. In his house. I happened to stay at his house a couple of times when I was moving back and forth between LA and Brooklyn. And so I stay at their place. It's really cool because he often called his place ranch. Let's go back to the ranch. We'll have dinner and let's go back to the ranch. His ranch has, of course, the house and then a really beautiful organic garden with all kinds of, you can think about anything like, put tomatoes, daikon and lettuce and learning about, they really appreciate, their plants and how they take care of them. They have a dog, they have cats. They also have a chicken coop. So it's like lots of animals besides humans. So I wrote a tune about that place and it's called Rancho Calaveras.
Okay.
Of course, he lives on Calavera Street, and he always called his place ranch. So I just turned it into this piece, which is a 12-bar blues, kind of a country western style, and I added a number of animal noise and stuff like that. So there's cows, there is tiger, there's other things in there as well in the music.
Okay,
so that's my first place.
Awesome. Yeah, and what's a second place?
That would be the San Gabriel Mission Playhouse.
Oh, okay.
And the whole district, really, really historic. We happened to perform there 3 times during their Lunar New Year celebration. That was before the pandemic. I really enjoy playing there, just having such a great stage. We brought our 17-piece, and then later on we start doing 6-piece band there. And it's just, I just love the audience there and the vibe, especially during Lunar New Year when they have the outdoor fair.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I wish I would have known that. That's something I would like to go see.
Yeah.
And what's the third one?
And that would be the Huntington Library, especially the Chinese Garden.
Okay.
Because not only that is the biggest Chinese garden, I think, in the Western Hemisphere. It's also the most pleasant one because there is just a lot of places to sit and to enjoy because this is based on the Suzhou garden from Suzhou, China. So this with the lake, all the buildings surrounding the lake. And you're supposed to appreciate the garden by looking at it at different angles. Mm-hmm. So they provide a lot of seatings there. And we start playing there, a small group playing there at the Mid-Autumn Moon about 3 years ago. Oh. And we're looking forward to returning there for 3 nights in late September. And I think it's 29th, 30th of September and the 1st of October.
Okay. This is for a moon festival?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. Is it your 4-piece that's going to be there?
4-piece as well as singers.
Wow.
So now we are collaborating with a couple of singers singing in actually 5 different languages. We have songs from Mandarin, Cantonese to English, French, Spanish, and Japanese.
Wow.
I guess there were 6 languages.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I hope I'm here for that. End of September. Beginning of October. Yeah. Okay. Well, Alan, thank you so much for coming on this show and sharing about your journey and your passion. It's really clear that you really love music and composing, and it's a real joy to see people who have that kind of love for what they do.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Russell, for having me.
Yeah, Alan, if someone wants to hear your music or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
AlanChenJazzOrchestra.com, as well as Apple Music and Spotify and Amazon Prime as well.
Under the same name?
The same name, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again, Alan, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Well, there you go. There's another show for you and another interesting guest from right here on the SGV. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out our full catalog of episodes on our website, sgvmasterkey.com. Shoot us an email, info@sgvmasterkey.com. And until next week, we'll see you then.
You've been listening to the SGV Master Key Podcast. Our passion is the small businesses and the people that make up the San Gabriel Valley, and it's our honor to have them on the show. We hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure to like, rate, and review. The show is produced by Russell Mano, edited by Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on the SGV Master Key Podcast.
Master, no, kind of master.